In the arid wasteland of Port Augusta, South Australia, where the earth is scorched by 40-degree heat and fresh water is virtually non-existent, a futuristic structure rises out of the dust. It looks like a solar power plant, dominated by a 127-meter-tall concrete tower surrounded by a field of 23,000 robotic mirrors. But this facility is not generating electricity for the grid. It is growing food. This is Sundrop Farms, and it represents a complete defiance of agricultural logic. Conventional farming requires three things: fertile soil, fresh water, and mild weather. Port Augusta has none of them. The ground is barren. The only water source is the salty Spencer Gulf, and the climate is hostile to almost all vegetation. Yet, inside the glass fortress powered by these mirrors, the facility is producing 17,000 tons of premium truss tomatoes annually. The engineering paradox here is stark. How do you use the sun, the very force that dries out the land, to create a lush, water-rich environment? And how do you irrigate sensitive crops using seawater that is 3 times saltier than the limit for most plants? While traditional farms in Australia are going bankrupt due to unpredictable droughts and rising water costs, Sundrop has decoupled itself from the weather entirely. They are not farming the land. They are farming the sun and the sea. But a project of this scale comes with a massive price tag and significant technical risks. How does a $200 million experiment justify its existence when you can just grow tomatoes in the dirt? To understand why engineers built a glass cathedral in the middle of nowhere, we must look at the brutal numbers of modern agriculture. Southern Australia is ground zero for climate change. In Port Augusta, the average annual rainfall is a meager 250 millimeters. Yet the evaporation rate exceeds 2,400 millimeters. This creates a 1:10 hydrological deficit. For every liter of rain that falls, the sun tries to steal 10. Relying on traditional open-field farming here is not a business. It is a mathematical impossibility. The location was chosen for its two abundant, free resources: solar radiation averaging 5.5 kilowatt-hours per square meter per day, some of the highest on Earth, and an endless supply of seawater from the Spencer Gulf. The mission was to build a system that required zero fresh water and zero fossil fuels for heating. Construction began in 2014, and it was a logistical nightmare. The team had to install a 20-hectare high-tech greenhouse, large enough to fit 28 soccer fields, on land that was essentially scrub desert. But the centerpiece was the solar field. They installed 23,000 computer-controlled mirrors, known as heliostats, covering a sprawling 51 hectares. Unlike standard solar panels that sit still, each of these mirrors is motorized. They track the sun with a precision of 0.1 degrees, reflecting beams of light to a single focal point, the top of the 127-meter central tower. The energy density here is terrifying. When all 23,000 mirrors lock onto the receiver, they generate 39 megawatts of thermal energy. The temperature at the top of the tower doesn't just get hot. It screams past 500 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. Simultaneously, engineers had to solve the water supply. They trenched a 5.5-kilometer pipeline from the coast to the facility. This is not a garden hose. It is a critical artery designed to pump seawater at a rate capable of filling an Olympic swimming pool every few hours. The construction cost ballooned to approximately $200 million. To put that in perspective, a traditional high-end greenhouse might cost $1 million per hectare. Sundrop was spending $10 million per hectare. This massive capex or capital expenditure created a high barrier to entry. Critics called it economic insanity. However, the engineers were betting on the OPEX or operational expenditure. In a world where oil prices fluctuate and water costs are rising by 10 to 15% annually, Sundrop locked in their inputs at virtually zero. They were playing a 20-year game against the rising cost of keeping humanity alive. Now that the infrastructure is built, the facility ceases to be a construction site and becomes a living, breathing thermodynamic engine. The operation inside Sundrop Farms is a masterclass in energy conversion, split into two distinct worlds: the steel world of the solar tower and the green world of the greenhouse. It begins with the thermal loop. As the 23,000 heliostats focus their beams, the receiver at the top of the tower acts as a thermal exchange unit. It doesn't generate electricity directly like a solar panel. Instead, it heats a closed loop of water to temperatures exceeding 115 degrees Celsius, creating high-pressure steam. This steam is the lifeblood of the entire facility, and it is directed into a turbine system. Let's dive deeper with me into the operating mechanism of this tower. Most power plants use steam to generate electricity and then vent the leftover heat as waste. Sundrop cannot afford waste. They use a cogeneration system. First, the steam spins a turbine to generate about 1.5 megawatts of electricity, enough to power the facility's massive seawater pumps, packing lines, and climate control computers completely off-grid. But the exhaust steam, which is still incredibly hot, is sent to a multi-effect distillation (MED) unit. This is the heart of the water system. The raw seawater pumped from the Spencer Gulf is fed into this unit. Using the waste heat from the turbine, the seawater is boiled in a vacuum. The salt and impurities are left behind, while the steam condenses into pure, distilled water. This unit runs 24/7, churning out approximately 1 million liters of freshwater every single day. To put that in perspective, that is enough water to fill a standard competition swimming pool every 48 hours, produced entirely from sunlight and the ocean. Once the water is distilled, it enters the green world, the 20-hectare glasshouse. This is not a farm in the traditional sense. It is a biosecure factory floor. The environment inside defies the reality outside. While the external desert air is a bone-dry 40 degrees Celsius with 10% humidity, inside the glass, it is a lush, tropical 25 degrees with 70% humidity. This atmospheric hack is achieved through a seawater pad cooling system. One entire wall of the greenhouse is lined with honeycomb-shaped cardboard pads. Cold seawater flows down these pads while giant fans on the opposite wall pull the hot desert air through them. As the dry air hits the wet pads, the water evaporates instantly, absorbing the heat and dropping the air temperature by up to 15 degrees in seconds. It is the same physical principle as sweating, but applied on an industrial scale. Conversely, in the freezing desert winter, the thermal energy stored in the tower's water tanks is released to heat the greenhouse, keeping the crops in a perpetual eternal spring. Now let's look at the biology. The crop of choice here is the truss tomato. These are not bush plants. They are indeterminate vines that can grow up to 15 meters long. The plants do not touch the ground. The desert soil is too salty and carries too many soil-borne diseases. Instead, the tomatoes are rooted in coconut coir, a fibrous byproduct of the coconut industry that is pH neutral and holds water like a sponge. This substrate is contained in plastic bags arranged in perfect rows that stretch for hundreds of meters. The irrigation system is a masterpiece of precision known as fertigation. Computers monitor the sunlight levels every minute. If a cloud passes over, the plant's photosynthesis slows down, and the computer automatically reduces the water flow. When the sun blazes, the system injects a precise cocktail of nitrogen, potassium, and calcium mixed with the distilled water directly into the root zone via drip lines. Because the system is hydroponic, the growth rate is explosive. A tomato vine here grows at a speed of 15 to 30 centimeters per week. Workers on hydraulic scissor lifts constantly move through the rows, performing a technique called lean and lower. As the plant grows upward, they harvest the fruit at the bottom, trim the leaves, and lower the vine down the string, coiling the bare stem at the base. This ensures the fruit-bearing part of the plant is always at the optimal height for light and labor efficiency. The result is a harvest cycle that never stops. A traditional field tomato has a season of 3 to 4 months. A Sundrop tomato vine is a 12-month production engine. Finally, there is the biological defense system. In open field farming, you fight pests with chemical warfare or pesticides. In this sealed glass fortress, they use biological warfare. The farm is a no-fly zone for local insects. To control pests like whiteflies that might sneak in, Sundrop releases predatory bugs like Nisidiacoris tenuis. These good bugs hunt down the bad bugs, maintaining a balance without a single drop of toxic chemical touching the fruit. They even introduce commercial bumblebee hives into the greenhouse. These bees are the unsung workers of the operation. They spend their entire lives inside the glass, pollinating millions of yellow tomato flowers. It is a surreal juxtaposition. Inside, thousands of bees are buzzing in a humid, chemical-free jungle, while just centimeters away on the other side of the glass, the environment is a salty, lifeless, scorching desert. This is the mechanism of Sundrop, a closed-loop system where the sun powers the pumps move the ocean cools the air, and the waste heat creates the rain. It is arguably the most sophisticated integration of physics and biology in the history of agriculture. The result of this thermodynamic equation is a level of productivity that makes traditional farming look like a hobby. Let's look at the hard output numbers. Sundrop Farms produces approximately 17,000 tons of truss tomatoes per year. To visualize that volume, imagine 46 heavy-duty semi-trucks leaving the desert fully loaded every single week, non-stop. This single facility now supplies roughly 15% of the entire tomato market of Australia. But the real business genius isn't just the volume, it's the buyer. Sundrop bypassed the volatile wholesale market entirely. They signed a landmark 10-year offtake agreement with Coles, one of Australia's largest supermarket chains. In the agricultural world, a 10-year fixed contract is unheard of. While traditional farmers lose sleep wondering if the market price will drop to $1.50 per kilo, Sundrop has a guaranteed buyer at a guaranteed price. This transforms the farm from a risky agricultural venture into a stable industrial utility, generating estimated revenues in the tens of millions of dollars annually. Now, let's audit the efficiency ratios. 1. The water math. In conventional arid farming, producing 1 kilogram of tomatoes requires between 60 to 80 liters of fresh groundwater. At Sundrop's scale, a traditional farm would drain the local aquifer by 1 billion liters per year. Sundrop's freshwater footprint is effectively zero. They harvest the Pacific Ocean. By using desalinated water, they are saving approximately 450 megaliters of precious terrestrial freshwater annually, enough to supply a small town. 2. The energy audit. Greenhouses are notorious energy hogs. Heating a 20-hectare glass box during a desert winter usually burns massive amounts of fossil fuel. Sundrop's solar tower displaces the need for approximately 2 million liters of diesel fuel per year. In terms of carbon, they are eliminating 16,000 tons of CO2 annually. This isn't just greenwashing. Financially, this removes the volatility of oil prices from their balance sheet. When global gas prices spike, Sundrop's operating costs stay flat. 3. Yield per square meter. This is the ultimate metric of land efficiency. A traditional open-field tomato farm yields about 5 to 10 kilograms per square meter. A standard greenhouse gets 15 to 30 kilograms. Sundrop, with its CO2 enrichment and climate control, is hitting 60 to 80 kilograms per square meter. They are extracting 8 times more food from the same square footage of land compared to traditional methods. 4. Consistency. Agriculture is usually defined by seasonality. You harvest in summer, you starve in winter. Sundrop has broken this cycle. Because they control the sun and the temperature, they harvest 365 days a year. This reliability is exactly why Coles signed the contract. Supermarkets hate volatility. They lose money when shelves are empty. They pay a premium for a factory that delivers the exact same red, 100-gram tomato in the middle of winter as it does in the middle of summer. Essentially, Sundrop didn't just build a farm. They built a biological factory that turns seawater and sunlight into cash flow, with an efficiency rate that nature alone could never achieve. However, no engineering project is without its flaws and risks. The dark side of Sundrop Farms is the financial barrier. The $200 million price tag means this model is not accessible to the average farmer. It requires massive institutional investment. Critics argue that the return on investment takes too long, potentially 15 to 20 years. If the global price of tomatoes crashes, or if the solar tower suffers a catastrophic mechanical failure, the financial model could collapse. There is also the environmental question of the brine. Desalination produces a hypersaline byproduct. For every liter of fresh water produced, there is leftover brine that is twice as salty as the ocean. Sundrop must manage this discharge carefully to avoid damaging the marine ecosystem of the Spencer Gulf, although they claim their dilution methods mitigate this impact. Comparatively, why haven't we seen this in California or the Middle East on a massive scale yet? The answer is land and logistics. You need a specific geography. Cheap coastal land with high solar radiation. Not every desert has a coastline, and not every coast has a desert. But the lesson of Sundrop Farms is undeniable. It proves that food security does not have to depend on rainfall. We can trade capital for security. As climate change accelerates, the Sundrop model offers a blueprint for survival. It demonstrates that with enough energy, specifically solar energy, we can turn the ocean into a farm. We are moving from an era of hunter-gatherer farming, where we hope for rain, to an era of manufacturing food, where inputs are controlled with mathematical precision. The question for the future is, can we make this technology cheap enough for developing nations? Or will this level of food security remain a luxury for wealthy countries? This facility stands as a monument to human ingenuity. It forces us to rethink the definition of a farm. It is not land. It is a machine. And in a world running out of fresh water, this machine might be the most important invention of the 21st century. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next field.